His followers, Reb Yudel and Reb Shemuel Isaac, used to travel from Deshev to Medvedevka in order to visit the Rebbe. At one period they wanted to move to the Medvedevka region in order to be close to him all the time, and so they did. The Rebbe then told them he greatly missed their traveling when they used to have to journey to him. With every single step they would take on their way to him, an angel was created. They said to him, "But what about all the efforts and footsteps involved before we hired the coach to bring us?" "They are also included," replied the Rebbe. "Every one of those steps also creates an angel." On the eve of the last Rosh Hashanah in Uman, the Rebbe spoke about this and said, "If only I were worthy of seeing the clear, radiant light of the road you travel to be with me." He said, "People would be amazed if they realized the love that exists between us." Less than he said, "Concerning each of my followers, God says, Israel, in whom I take pride." Greater than. Once Rabbi Nachman told his followers, "What is there for you to think about? All you need to do is provide the bricks and plaster, and I will build the most awesome and amazing buildings out of them." In other words, if we would just occupy ourselves with our devotions with simplicity, studying the Torah, praying, and carrying out the mitzvah, he would do his work and make of them what he would. As he said this, he drew out the word buildings, as if to emphasize the extraordinary beauty and awe, not someness of the constructions he would form. Someone told me the Rebbe once said that if he wanted to reveal to others the fear of heaven he himself possessed, it would be impossible to stand within 4 cubits of his house. But he deliberately concealed it. I personally heard him say, "I am a treasure house of the fear of heaven. Anyone who wants can receive from me." And in point of fact, it was very visible how anyone who became his follower soon became filled with a powerful sense of religious awe and carried out his devotions with great enthusiasm. Nothing of the like had been seen before. Even today the Rebbe's awe is stored away in his holy writings. One who studies and works with them truthfully and honestly will attain great awe and be intensely aroused to serve God, for all the Rebbe's words are like fiery coals. Someone told me the Rebbe once said, "If we saw a treasure house we would surely run there and dig down, even if we had to get filthy with dirt and mud to break through and find it." Am I not a treasure house of the fear of heaven? Why aren't people eager to run after me and attain it? They asked him how it was possible to attain it, and he said, "With the lips and the heart. You must break through and ask for it, in your mouth and in your heart. To do it," the Rebbe said, "the Zohar mentions that there is awe and there is awe. I want to reveal a kind of awe, the like of which has never been known before, and I want to get it into my followers." The Rebbe told one of his followers, "The Shabbatot my followers spend with me are very great. They are better than 7 complete fasts from Shabbat to Shabbat." The Rebbe once spoke about King David's spiritual power. By calling out 8 times, "Absalom, my son," he was able to raise him up from the 7 chambers of hell and bring him into the Garden of Eden. The Rebbe said he himself possessed this power, and by words alone he could raise a person from all 7 chambers of hell and bring him into the Garden of Eden. The Rebbe was once explaining to me the impossibility of being a truly devout Jew without being close to the Zadok of one's time. He said to me, "Before the true Zadok is in the world, it is indeed possible to draw close to God by oneself. But once the Zadok is already in the world, there is no other way to draw close to God except by drawing close to the Zadok." The Rebbe was leaving a certain town where a man who had formed a slight attachment to him had just died. This man had never been in the habit of actually traveling to Breslov to be with the Rebbe. It was simply that he had been somewhat drawn to the Rebbe in Zlatipolia. Now he had died with a truly fine reputation. He left a very good name behind him. The Rebbe then said, "Even if someone merely touches me with his little finger, it is impossible to comprehend his level. You see, this man was not such a strong follower of mine. He merely formed a slight attachment, as you well know, for he never traveled to be with me at all. Even so, you see what a very good name he has left behind him. Everyone is praising him and telling how he remembered his Maker up to the very last moment. They are speaking about him with genuine admiration, for even when someone touches me only slightly, his attainments endure forever." One of the Rebbe's followers told me that once the Rebbe spoke to him about how strongly the evil inclination can attack less than us greater than. The Rebbe said, "I know the evil inclination you all have. If it were taken from you, endless fountains of blood would come spurting out and the whole world would be full of blood. Even when you purify yourselves, you will need great merit to appreciate how enormous the evil inclination you used to have was. Only I know it. Less than there was once a discussion about the great leader Rabbi Shalom Shachna of Probisht. I was told that the Rebbe said, there will come a time when everyone will see the difference between his greatness and that of Reb Shemuel Isaac, the Reb's follower. Afterwards, Reb Naphtali told me this story somewhat differently. He said that the discussion had been about Reb Udal, Reb Shemuel Isaac, and the above-mentioned leader. It was then that the Rebbe said, "There will come a time when everyone will see the difference between him and them." Greater than. Someone told me the Rebbe said that without a shadow of doubt every one of us would finally succeed in achieving what he had to in this world. The Holy One, blessed be he, would never do such a thing to me, the Rebbe went on, as to take one of my men from me in the middle. Each one of us would have many full years to struggle and systematically break through, until in the end he would come to the holy level he had to attain in this world. And that was the very purpose of his creation in the first place. Regarding the privilege of being with him, the Rebbe said that each occasion a person had the merit to be in his house, and each look the person gave him would never ever be lost. In Lipovic I heard that the Rebbe told his followers there, "How can you possibly repent? Will all your days and all your strength ever suffice to correct a single item of all the damage you have done? It is only because I repent for you, and have the power to rectify everything, that is all the damage you have done up till now. From now on the main thing is not to carry on like before. I won't even be particular about sins you may commit unintentionally. The main thing is that you should at least make sure not to sin deliberately." The Rebbe spoke at length about this. Once after Selichot, on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe stood up and said, "Other people would be quite satisfied if their Rosh Hashanah was as good as the Erev Rosh Hashanah you have." The Rebbe said, "My fire will burn until the coming of Mashiach." I was told that he said, "As for me, there is nothing for me to do in this world at all. For myself, there is nothing I need to do. I came into the world only to bring Jewish souls closer to God, but I can only help someone who comes to me and tells me what he needs. Him I can help." The Rebbe was speaking to a certain individual who was very simple. He told him, "You have the power to stir even a great man to serve God. A small piece of wood can set fire to a very large piece." Our sages said, "Why are words of Torah compared to wood? To teach you that just as a small piece of wood can set a large one on fire, so can words of Torah," he said. "The true Zadok can greatly benefit a person even after the person dies and goes to the next world. This applies as long as he is worthy of coming to the Zadok to receive his tikkun. You should know that the main obstacle encountered by an undeserving person is that they don't let him go to the true Zadok to be purified. They simply push him aside and set him on the wrong track, planting all kinds of confusing doubts in his mind, saying the Zadok has no power at all. Even there, among the destroying angels and evil forces, there is great opposition to the Zadok, just as there is in this world. The main thing is to be constantly aware of this, so as not to allow yourself to be deceived there. Simply stay firm in wanting to go to the true Zadok and nowhere else, and then you will certainly be permitted to do so." I heard that the Rebbe said, there too it takes a great deal of determination to remain firm in one's faith in the Zadok, and he told the story of what happened to a certain follower of Rabbi Mendel of Vitebsk, who had been sent on a mission from the Holy Land and died at sea. He said, "How many cases there were where the image of God was sunk in the mud and I brought them out of it. It is quite apparent how the very faces of the people who come near to me change and turn into Jewish faces. The image of God, I have people here who I don't know if the lowest pit of hell would have been enough for them. The lowest pit of hell would still have been too small for them, because if they had been able to break through and go lower, they would have done so. Yet because of me, they came closer to God." He said, "I am able to make most extraordinary vessels. The only thing lacking is that I am forced to make the tools by myself. Even the very smallest of all my followers will less than achieve what even the foremost leaders of the day will not greater than." There is a story about the saintly Reb Yitzchak Isaac, of blessed memory. The Rebbe had a vision in which he saw crowds and crowds pressing forward to hear Torah. They said to someone, "You teach us Torah." He did so, and the Rebbe heard, and was greatly impressed, and the Rebbe knew how to judge when it came to Torah. Apparently he said he had never heard Torah like this, and he asked if the soul who had taught it was in this world. They showed him, and he sent for the soul, and what happened happened. Before Pesach, Reb Yitzchak Isaac dreamed the entire Torah teaching that the Rebbe had heard, and he came to tell the Rebbe in a state of very great fear and trepidation. The Rebbe then went from him, and Reb Yitzchak Isaac was left in a state of weakness. Shortly afterwards he passed away. I was told that he once said, "The very least of my followers I lead along a path fit for a great Zadok. Less than well-known leaders will also come closer to me, though I will need to have great wealth for them, as they are like unwanted proselytes whose conversion is ulteriorly motivated. The Rebbe asked us to picture the foremost leader of the day. In the end, he said, this leader would certainly find himself standing on the other side of the door, greater than very jealous of the Rebbe's followers, especially of the one privileged enough to extend him less than a flame to light his pipe greater than. A certain man had been close to the Rebbe, but later became distanced from him. Afterwards he came back and journeyed to the Rebbe for the intermediate days of Pesach 5569, 1809. The Rebbe said to him, many years can pass and a person may not advance at all spiritually. He may stay exactly as he was or even get worse. But if he remains attached to the true Zadok, the attachment itself is very good. In fact, it is of inestimable value. Whereas if he had not been attached to the Zadok, he would have become far, far worse. The roads themselves seek to fulfill their mission. As the Midrash tells us in a comment on the verse in Lamentations 1-4, the roads of Zion are mourning. The roads themselves mourn because the festival pilgrims who used to pass along them have ceased. The same happens in the case of those who regularly travel to the true Zadok. If one of them, God forbid, stops coming, the very roads themselves mourn and yearn to fulfill their mission, because they long for one more traveler to pass along on his way to the true Zadok. I am amazed at how you could have abandoned our precious loving group. Whatever way you look at it, you gained nothing. If in the years you were far from me you did not go in the ways of God, then you certainly lost. And if you did serve God as you should have done, surely it would have been better if you had cast your lot in with us and served God and lived as a Jew in partnership with these precious companions. Then others would also have been able to benefit and grow through your efforts. To tell you what I am and what you have lost, I cannot. If you stay with me from now on, you will come to regret what happened in the past. There was one person who had not been with the Rebbe for several years. The Rebbe took him to task for it and said, was not the whole world created only to follow and minister to this man? This being the case, every single person is obliged to add his help and strength and be part of this Zadok's following. There are some people who become part of the following of the Zadok through their prayers or their fear of heaven. This is their way of strengthening and helping the Zadok. Others give him money or help his holy mission in other ways, and this is their way of becoming part of his following. But as for you, as far as I can see, you are no use to the world at all, because you contribute nothing to the following of this Zadok. Someone told me that the Rebbe once said, there are messengers, in Yiddish, Shtopitin, who go about from one person to a second, from the second to a third, and so on until eventually the matter reaches the Zadok. From all the trees and herbs, and indeed from everything in the world, there go forth messengers who pass from one person to the next and the next and the next until eventually the matter finds its way to the ear of the true Zadok. When the message reaches him, he is able to use it to get advice about ways for him to serve God. This is the meaning of the sage's statement that the whole world was created only Letzavat, to follow this man. Letzavat also bears the sense of advice. In other words, the whole world was created only to advise this man, for the 613 mitzvah are referred to in the Zohar as 613 pieces of advice, and this is what is expressed in the word letzavat, to advise. The Rebbe added that what he had said about the messengers who go about until the message reaches the true Zadok refers only to advice about how he should carry out his service. As for the Zadok's service itself, however, it is something so exalted and hidden that even the angels and seraphim do not understand it. Only God himself knows. The whole following of the Zadok which ministers to him, as explained above, may have some connection with the Zadok in his physical aspect, inasmuch as he too is clothed in a body. But as regards his soul, this is something totally different, exalted above and beyond. There were many other remarkable things that were raised in the course of this conversation. He said, to come to me and draw close is very hard. Even my children, and who could be closer to me than they are, experience all kinds of confusions when they want to come in to be with me. The hardest time of all to draw close is at the very beginning. So long as one is still in the initial period, it is very hard indeed. Later on, whatever happens, happens. But at the beginning, as long as the initial period lasts, it is a hard and onerous task to come in and draw close, he said. I will make you into groups and groups. Anyone who takes heed of me and fulfills everything I tell them will certainly become a great Zadok, come what may. The main thing is to throw aside your own ideas completely, and do only as I say. Fulfill everything to the letter. The Rebbe then spoke about the verse in Deuteronomy 32:6, O foolish and unwise nation. Obviously, the more one studies, the more successful he will be. He said, I have a muzzle that people listen to me and do what I tell them to do. In fact, quite a few of my supporters begged me to. One of his followers was talking to him about serving God. Rabbi Nachman said, Isn't that what my days are spent longing for? The whole time I am just standing, waiting, expecting, hoping, and yearning for God to give me the privilege of seeing you as I want you to be, serving Him honestly and sincerely the way I want you to. And I hope that with God's help it will be so. I am not only speaking about those who are close to me in person, but also about those who are close to my followers, and indeed anyone who has even the slightest contact with them. They will also certainly become sincere and devout Jews, and not only that. They can even become very great tzaddikim, regardless of what they were when they started. The Rebbe said in these very words, With my own eyes I have already spied out and examined every single one separately, and I hope that with God's help it will be so. On the same occasion he also said, I have finished, and I will finish. Once when the Rebbe was speaking to us, he said he wondered how it was that we were worthy of hearing such awesome, exalted, and holy Torah teachings directly from his lips. But, he said, in every assembly of 10 men the Shekhinah is present. Of myself, Reb Nozan, the Rebbe said to Reb Yitzchak of Terhavitza that as regards giving over Torah, he is unique in his generation. Less than one was told that when he was first drawing me closer to him, he said that it was going to be difficult. This was because he understood me to be a Baal Makshava, a deep thinker, one of the 24 characteristics that make it more difficult for a person to come close to God. He nevertheless said that he would attempt it greater than. Once I asked him if I should go out to others and talk with them about serving God. Talk to them? Yes, but I don't know what the other person is going through, I said. You don't need to know, he replied. In what way am I of any help to him? I asked. What concern is that of yours? He replied. And I understood that what he meant was, you do indeed accomplish something, he told me. Something of the yoke of government and the yoke of worldly responsibility I have already removed from you. And he also said to me, As for you, I have already taken you from this world. He said many stories would be told about his followers, stories and stories about each one of them. When I lived in Nemirov, I used to travel to Breslov regularly to see the Rebbe. I was once told that he had said he disapproved of the fact that people came to him by coach rather than on foot. This made a very deep impression on me, because I knew it was really only proper that we should go to him on foot. I very much wanted to do this, and God brought it about that I had the privilege of traveling to him on foot 3 times. On each of those occasions I know very well that I profited greatly from having gone on foot. Had I not been determined to get there somehow, even if it had to be on foot, I would not have gotten to him at all those 3 times. Praise be to God, who is good and does good to the wicked and righteous alike. Having succeeded in getting there those 3 times, I myself am at least partly aware how much I gained, because I still remember what I heard on each occasion, and I will know more than this in the future, if I am worthy. My friend Reb Naftali also went on foot after he heard what the Rebbe had said. Among the Reb's other followers were quite a few poor people who traveled long distances on foot time after time in order to be with him. Happy are they, and happy is their portion. In my own case, thank God, there was always enough money to cover the expenses, as I was from a wealthy background. It was only because of my great yearning that God made it possible for me as well to go on foot a few times. I was told that the Rebbe once spoke about a particular man who used to come to him on foot. The wicked Nebuchadnezzar took a mere 3 paces on foot, and earned himself such tremendous royal power. Sanhedrin 96a. How much more does a single Jew earn when he goes 5 miles and more, in order to see the Zadok? No eye has seen his reward. It would appear that the Rebbe had been talking about a man from Terhavitza who used to walk regularly from Terhavitza to Breslov, a distance of about 85 miles, 140 kilometers, in order to see the Rebbe. Once I was with the Rebbe when this man from Terhavitza arrived. The Rebbe told me that whenever he had spiritual problems, he would come all the way from Terhavitza to Breslov on foot. I understood that the Rebbe thought very highly of this. On another occasion, after the death of a young man from Nemirov who had been one of his followers, the Rebbe praised him also, saying that the young man had made it a rule that whenever he had any problem in connection with his Judaism, he would come on foot from Nemirov to Breslov. Happy are they, he said. I could turn you all into perfect tzaddikim on the highest of levels. But what would come of it? If so, God would be serving himself. In other words, it was his wish that we ourselves should labor at the task of serving God, using his power and guidance. not that he should simply hand it to us on a platter, as it were. He put the same point in other ways. Once he said, I can instill such fear of heaven in a person that he would take leave of his senses and become totally nullified. One of his followers in particular pressed him again and again, begging him to give him awe of heaven. The Rebbe told him he certainly had the power to give him a most powerful sense of awe, but there would be no purpose in it because he would simply become nullified and take leave of himself. Nevertheless, the man persisted with his request. After he left the Rebbe, he was suddenly overwhelmed with a tremendous sense of awe. He started crying out to God and making the weirdest sounds. He all but died. This carried on until the next day, when he came in to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asked him if he had experienced a sense of awe. The man answered, I no longer want this. He begged the Rebbe to take it from him. The Rebbe did so, and the man returned to his normal self. On the same subject, the Rebbe said to someone, If I were to pass my hand over your eyes, you would see awesome wonders, but I have no wish for this. I want you to work at serving God until you yourself achieve something. In the same vein, he once said to me, If God himself desired that he himself should serve himself, he would have no need of you. Reb Nachman writes, in other words, the tzaddik can invoke God's will to help a person in his devotions, despite the person's having acted in a way that made him deserve to be rejected. The tzaddik can still arouse God's love and prompt him to draw such a person closer and help him serve God. But the tzaddik cannot ask God to do everything himself. The Rebbe also said to me, Without me, you cannot accomplish anything. That is, I would not be able to serve God entirely by myself without his power and guidance. But, he continued, without you, I too can achieve absolutely nothing. That is, he could not help me as long as I made no efforts to avail myself of his help, because where I myself had to take the initiative, he himself could do nothing without me, even though ultimately everything was from him. One night Reb Naftali was singing a melody in the study house together with some of the Reb's other followers. The Rebbe himself had already gone to bed, but he got up and went into the study house to hear them singing. Afterwards he said to them, You should know that your singing pierced open the very heavens. Just think, I had already gone to bed, but your singing drew me from my bed and I came here, he said. I am a river that cleanses from all stains. He said of Reb Nachman and Reb Naftali, They really are jewels. On another occasion someone was talking to the Rebbe about Reb Nachman, and he said he was certain that Reb Nachman would become a complete tzaddik. The Rebbe took issue with him and said he was not correct. I'm telling you that he already is a tzaddik. When Reb Nachman and Reb Naftali were first becoming close to the Rebbe, he said to them, Surely I've known you for quite some time already. It's just that for a long time we haven't seen each other face to face, but now here we are looking at each other. When Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was leaving Terhavitza, Reb Shemuel Yitzchak of Cheren sat next to him in his coach. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak said to him, Believe me, if I thought people would listen to me, I would cry out with a voice that would be heard from one end of the world to the other. Whoever wishes to be genuinely pure and saintly and truly serve God should be sure to attach himself as soon as possible to the holy Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. But I know full well that not only would they not listen to me, they would stir up the most intense opposition against me, and I might be in danger of losing someone I might otherwise have influenced to repent. That is why I have no choice but to hold my peace. Once the Rebbe was speaking in praise of his followers, and he said that even if one of them should ever become confused and unsettled, God forbid, his faith in the Rebbe would still be undiminished. He mentioned one of his followers by name, an exceptionally saintly individual, and said that this man had achieved a level of repentance where he had completely atoned for any sins he might have committed. The Kabbalistic literature mentions that anyone who achieves such a level is assured he will not sin. I guarantee you, the Rebbe said, this man will never sin. Some time later the man went through a very difficult period and became quite unsettled. He suffered from a severe depression. He was brought to the Rebbe, and told him the main reason for his depression was the sage's teaching that when a poor man is brought for his heavenly judgment, and tries to excuse himself for having learned so little Torah on account of his poverty, they ask him if he was poorer than Hillel. In that case, there was no hope for the poor at all. He went on to say that his only consolation was that he was a follower of the Rebbe, and he knew that with the help of the Rebbe's great power he would be cleared when it came to his heavenly judgment. The Rebbe once said to his followers, The only thing that gives me any pleasure and contentment is when I see one of my followers showing some sign of his attachment to the Torah and serving God. It was only for this that I have abandoned myself, my wife and my precious children. I could have been a famous leader and tzaddik just like all the others, whose chassidim come to see them without knowing what they have come for. They come and go and have no idea why. But I never wanted any of this. My only concern is to get you to repent. If you want to know what is precious to me, it is when I see the poorest beggar going about with a torn hat, torn clothes and torn shoes, serving God. One beg of you, be good pure Jews. This is my only hope and desire. The Rebbe once told his followers, for 3 days running I've been working to attain a particular level of understanding without success, until in the end I made use of something one of my followers had accomplished. Through this I succeeded in achieving the level one wanted. Is it any wonder that the Baal Shem Tov possessed a special ability to attain very exalted perceptions after having followers who were such great tzaddikim and whose accomplishments were so outstanding? On another occasion, shortly before Shavuot 5567, 1807, the Rebbe was speaking about a man who had had a slight attachment to him and whose death he had just heard about. Who knows what's going on with him there, the Rebbe said. At least if he had been as close to me as my true followers, it's nearly Shavuot. In that case, he would be under the illusion that he was busily making preparations for his journey to be with me for Shavuot, hiring the coach and so forth, until in the end they would have had to ask him, why are you busying yourself with all this? You're dead now. And that would be a great favor to him, because at least he would know that he's already dead. But who knows, it could well be that he is under the illusion he has a brewing pan or the like in his hand, and he is hurrying to buy barley and so on to make spirits. He could be getting quite worn out from all these imaginary activities. After Shavuot, however, the Rebbe said that in fact the man had been with him for Shavuot. In the same period just before Shavuot 5567, some people from Breslov told the Rebbe about a wealthy individual who had given large sums of money to the saintly Rabbi Baruch. A very poor man from Nemirov happened to be standing there at the time. The Rebbe said to them, "This poor man has given me more relative to his situation than the rich man gave to Rabbi Baruch." The man in question made his living as a schoolteacher. Pesach time was when the schools used to hire their teachers. Yet when the man heard that the Rebbe was in Breslov, and there was a possibility that he might remain there for Shavuot, he was afraid that if he accepted a position he would not be able to be with the Rebbe for Shavuot. He would not be able to leave his class without a teacher for the time it would take to journey to and from Breslov. Because of this he decided not to accept a position, and he spent the whole summer without a livelihood. "You see," said the Rebbe, "he's given his very heart to be close to me, and that is more than the wealthy man gave." When Reb Nozon was first becoming close to the Rebbe mentioned it to his daughter Adel, speaking about Reb Nozon in the very highest terms. He said to her, "What can I tell you about his wisdom? He would just have to glance at this synagogue, and he could tell you how many feet high it is." In the same period, the Rebbe also spoke about him to Reb Yitzchak, son-in-law of the Maggid of Terhavitza, praising his qualities very greatly. As yet Reb Yitzchak himself had not seen Reb Nozon and didn't know what he looked like. The Rebbe said to him, "If you look at him you will see that he has such deep humility that he is literally like dust and mud." And so it was that shortly afterwards Reb Yitzchak was going along when he met Reb Nozon, as he was walking in the street at a very smart pace as he always did, dressed in the fine clothing of the wealthy classes. Even so, Reb Yitzchak could see at once that this was the man the Rebbe had described. A man who was in his own eyes literally like dust and mud. The Rebbe said, "In time to come the whole world will be Breslover chassidim. Leo said lovo vet die game Welt zien Breslover chassidim." The Midrash comments on the verse in Ezekiel, "I will give you a levi basar, a heart of flesh." Do not read basar, flesh, but bozer, glad. Everyone will be glad at the good fortune of his friend. The letters of the words lev bozer, a glad heart, spell out the word Breslov. When the Rebbe left Zlatipolia to move to Breslov, the Maggid of Terhavitza had a dream in the sukkah about how the Rebbe's leaving Zlatipolia for Breslov is hinted at in the above verse from Ezekiel. The first part of the verse says, "I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh." The phrase heart of stone is related to the verse in Kings, which tells us that King Solomon made silver to be in Jerusalem as stones. The name Zlatipolia connotes an abundance of wealth and money. Zlati in Russian signifies gold. "And I will give you a lev basar, heart of flesh." These are the letters of the name Breslov. The greatness of his books and teachings, he said, "As yet the world has not had the least taste of me. If they were to hear just one of my lessons together with its proper melody and dance, they would pass into a state of total surrender. I mean the whole world, even the animals and plants, everything that exists would be nullified. Their very souls would expire from the overwhelming delight they would have. If you want to understand this, think of the power of music and dance. Someone who really knows music can play melodies that stem from the very essence of music, melodies that have the power to draw the very soul of the listener after their every nuance. The listener becomes totally subordinate to the melody. He surrenders himself to the drawing power of the music. The melody breaks through to him, arouses him and draws him in its train. This is even more so in the case of dance. Someone who really knows how to dance can dance in such a way that his body expresses every subtle shade of the music he is dancing to. Every limb of his body has to move in accordance with the music. There are times when the music may call for a movement of the head, the legs, or the arms, and so forth, or it may call for the dancer to bend down and swerve. The movements of the body have to be in perfect harmony with the music. Now let us go a stage further and think of a melody with words. In a perfect song, the words of the song are bound up with the melody in every single detail. The song expresses in words exactly the same as the music expresses through the beauty of the melody. Now add the element of dance. The dance expresses in terms of bodily movement what the words and music express in their terms. Everything works in harmony. When the words, the melody, and the dance are all related to each other and woven together in a perfect unity, anyone who is worthy of experiencing them will be so overwhelmed by delight that his soul will literally expire and he will fall into a state of total surrender. This is the greatest of all pleasures. Anyone who has not tasted this knows nothing of pleasure. Happy is the eye that sees this, because even in the next world not everyone will be worthy of hearing and seeing this, for only those who labor on the eve of Shabbat will eat on Shabbat. Those who stand around such a player as he sings and dances are powerless to do anything. They simply expire with yearning and delight. Try to understand this well. It is impossible to explain it in writing. Someone with an understanding of music and dance may be able to form a faint conception of the beauty, pleasure, and yearning we have mentioned. The closer a person is, the more naturally the movements come to him. The nearer he is to the melody and dance, and the more understanding he has, the more the movements of the music and dance come to him naturally as a result of the drawing power of the delight they cause. Thus we see that when a person is listening to music and dancing, the pleasure they evoke draws him in and takes him over. Quite spontaneously, he starts moving himself and begins singing and dancing a little. The singing and dancing come to him automatically. The same is true on the side of holiness. The closer a person is to the lesson, its music and dance, the more the movements of the lesson's holy song and dance come to him naturally and automatically. All this I heard myself. The Rebbe began this conversation by saying, they would only have to hear one of my lessons with its melody and dance, and the whole world would expire. The Rebbe then stopped and asked, "What did I say?" I repeated what he had said. The Rebbe then said to me, "What do you think? Even the animals and plants would expire." He then said what has been recorded here. The Rebbe said that his very inability to teach Torah from time to time was itself something unique, indeed more so than his other qualities. I can be all ready with several completely original and powerful teachings, and all of a sudden I forget everything. I remember nothing. I know nothing at all of any book. I don't even know a song. Every single thing is completely forgotten. It is all hidden from me. This in itself is something truly extraordinary. Several times I heard him say things like this. It was something quite usual for him to say, "Now I know nothing, absolutely nothing." He would say this even though just a few moments before that he had revealed the most amazing and original teachings. In rabbinic literature we find the concept that each person starts from his own verse. Thus we find that one sage derives the teaching from this verse. The other derives it from a different verse. Each individual has a place where his learning and his Torah begin, according to his starting point at the verse in question. So the entire Torah unfolds for him stage by stage. For a second person, the Torah will unfold in a different order according to his starting point. It is different for each person. In every case, the Torah unfolds itself in a certain order according to the place where a person starts, wherever that might be. If a particular Tana, a Mishnaic teacher, were to have come to the verse that belonged to a different Tana, he would not have been able to draw from there, because each individual can draw and receive only if he starts in his own place. Less than but, said the Rebbe. I can start from wherever I choose. Understand this. Greater than, the Rebbe said that if his book Likuti Maharan had never come into the world, events would have taken a different course. He had several times felt a desire to produce a halakhic work giving legal decisions on all the laws in the Shulchan Aruch. In each detail of the halakha, the work would have given a conclusive decision, or stated which previous authority's decision was binding. But now that Likutei Moharan had come into the world, the other work would never materialize. The fact was that innovations in Talmudic study were much easier to develop. No one had any conception of the path the Rebbe would have taken with his innovations, yet for anyone who did know, they would have been very easy. What was needed to understand them was a mastery of the 13 exegetical principles of the Torah. On Wednesday, the week of Torah reading Teruma, I went in to the Rebbe, and he told me the following. Lately life has not been the least bit comfortable for me. For months now I have been hoping and longing to understand a certain thing. In fact, the matter has been known to me, but I have not known it through the Torah. For months now I have been longing to know it through the Torah. Because how could there be anything that is not alluded to in the Torah and now I have found it mentioned in the Torah. At first it was very hidden from me. Indeed, there are things that the Torah alludes to with barely so much as a hint. How many laws are based on each stroke of the letters of the Torah? As the sages said, on every single stroke of every letter, there are mountains and mountains of halakot. But now I have found this matter explicitly mentioned in the Torah. There are also things that are beyond the Torah. Well, the Rebbe continued, now that I have discovered where this matter is mentioned in the Torah, I am happy with my life. If I had left this world without finding out, then even if I were to find out in the other world, they would have counted it as part of my reward in the world to come. Whereas now, on the contrary, in other words, now that he had achieved this insight while still in this world, he would deserve a reward countless times greater in the next world. As for me, he said, I am not part of the present world at all. That is why the world cannot bear me. The role of leader is of no relevance to me at all. In the present world, it is not my part to have any authority at all. Even the little authority I do have is really not authority at all. On the contrary, it is laughter and mockery. Even the little I have goes contrary to nature. I had to force myself to accept it against my nature, because it is only by this means that something I say is able to come into the world. Were it not for the little bit of authority I possess, none of my teachings or conversations and stories would be able to come into the world. Had there been no such generation as the present, and my teachings had been given in the time of the Ari, of blessed memory, or even in the time of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, of blessed memory, there would have been a very big commotion. The Rebbe said that Likutei Moharan was the beginning of the redemption. Now that it has come out, he said, I very much want people to study it. They must study it so much that they know it by heart. Yemi Moharnat 29, because it is filled with guidance and it has the power to stir men to God in a way nothing else can compare with. Less than those who do so have no need for any other work on ethics and moral guidances. Later on he said explicitly that learning his works was the beginning of the redemption. May it come speedily in our days. He said the best way to study his works was to follow two separate routines. The first should be one of study at speed, so as to become thoroughly conversant with the books. The second should be one of study in depth, because his books contain the profoundest depths. Once the Rebbe was encouraging someone to study his book. He said it was a great mitzvah to study it at length, and he told him that one could develop a great mind through doing so, because even in its literal interpretation the work contains profound wisdom and depth. Those who study his works constantly can become pure and holy and will then be worthy of seeing the inner meaning they contain. Beneath the surface there is much that is not evident at all on a literal level. Happy is the one who can study them regularly. He said, in my teachings there is depth. Some of his lessons were recorded by others. However, where the text is his own, one should examine it with the same care and precision as a biblical passage. The Rebbe appears to be constantly repeating himself in a way that seems superfluous. In fact, this is intentional and serves a very important purpose. One must examine what he says with great care. Someone who has eyes and devotes himself wholeheartedly to understanding the Rebbe's words will understand a tiny portion of the tremendous depths that his works contain. They are unparalleled by any other work. The Rebbe was once praising his own book, and he said it is possible to become a complete Baal Teshuvah, a master of repentance, through learning it. He very much wanted it to be printed over and over again and spread throughout the world. He said, there will be people who will learn and pray by means of this book. And he said that if a person is prepared to sit with his works and study them in a spirit of openness and honesty, without trying to pick holes and argue for the sake of it, then without any doubt the very sinews of his heart's obstinacy will be split apart. He said that everyone should try to buy the book. Someone who didn't have the money should sell less than all his other books in order to buy this work. If the man didn't have books to sell, he should sell greater than the very pillow under his head to buy it. He said the book would prove to have great significance, and it would be in great demand. It would be printed again and again. If only I could see it. I would stand there and watch. He said that in the case of the lessons he himself had written down, the language itself was very beneficial. For these lessons were universal. I heard him say, "My Torah teachings are made up entirely of Bechino categories and analyses." When the manuscript of the first part of Likutei Moharan was being bound, the Rebbe said, "To you this may seem like a straightforward matter, but how many worlds depend on this?" He said, "The evil one has great power to cover people's eyes. Were it not for this, the book would cause a tremendous arousal in the world." He said he knew the place of all the Tzaddikim of the past from Adam to the present, the place they were from, the place their Torah teachings were drawn from, and where they reached when they left the world. He started saying how the Baal Shem Tov was from the Sephira of Binah, understanding, while the Maggid of Mezrich was from that of Chokmah, wisdom, and how even though Binah is lower than Chokmah, the Baal Shem Tov's Torah teachings were drawn from the level of Binah which is above Chokmah. The teachings of Rabbi Baruch, on the other hand, were drawn from the level of Binah, which is below this level of Chokmah. As for my Torah teachings, however, less than they are drawn from higher levels than these. Even if I were to receive from these lower levels, I would not want such teachings. I am interested only in teachings that are entirely original, greater than. Less than one was told that he said his lessons come from a place from which no one else has ever received. Once I heard him speaking proudly about the greatness of his teachings, and he said, "Do I not know where I take them from?" From what he said and the way he said it. The implication was that he drew his Torah teachings from the highest, most exalted of places. Turn aside from evil and do good. The Rebbe said, "My way of turning aside from evil is an extraordinary innovation, and my doing good is also extraordinary because in truth I do very much good, and my Torah teachings achieve a great deal in the world. All the blessings in the world are brought down to the world through my teachings." The Rebbe was speaking to someone, and he said, "What business are you in? You trade with wheat. This too is drawn down by my teachings," he said. "There are two groups of people I have great pity on, those who are able to draw near to me and don't, and those who are close to me but do not carry out what I say. For I know that when the time comes for them to be laid out on the ground with their feet to the door, awaiting burial, they will take a good look at themselves and regret very much that they were not worthy of drawing close to me or fulfilling what I said. Then they will know that if they had followed me, and done what FSA'd, there is not a single level in the world I would not have brought them to. But then it won't help them," he said. "If Mashiach does not come soon, God forbid, the world will miss me a lot, more than less than they miss the Baal Shem Tov greater than." Someone told me that the Rebbe had been praising his Torah teachings and emphasizing their greatness, and he said that people should make great efforts to buy his books, for even if they are just lying in a chest or in a bookcase, they are of great benefit. He said that his books have a great protective power in a house, and can even give protection against loss and damage to one's property and possessions. The Rebbe went on to mention a certain wealthy man he knew. He said that even for him, it would be a great benefit if my book were in his house, because it would give him protection against everything, and his riches would stay with him. The Rebbe told the person he was speaking with to encourage this wealthy man to see that he bought his books. Elsewhere, it is mentioned how much the Rebbe desired that his teachings be spread out among all Jews, though not for his own honor, God forbid. After giving the lesson, Rabbi Shimon opened his discourse. The Rebbe said, "It was a nice wedding. It would have been right to invite God with his celestial retinue to the wedding." I said to him, "They were definitely here." "Apparently," he replied. He said he did not want any of the teachings he revealed prior to his visit to the Holy Land to be included in his books, only those he gave afterwards, and as for these, they should write them all down, even his casual conversations. Everything should be written. He told us many times to record every single conversation we heard from him. When something is written in a book, he said, if a person does not remember it today, he can always look at it again and learn it another time. But the things you hear from my lips you will never ever hear another time. So you must certainly remember every single word and write everything down, every conversation, every story, everything. It was because of this that I started writing down some of the things I heard from him personally or secondhand. But this was only a tiny fraction. The Rebbe said explicitly that every single conversation of his had the power to bring us to purity and holiness, and even make us tzaddikim of the kind he wanted us to be all our lives. We just had to be prepared to follow what he said and work with it. Anyone who had the privilege of hearing him in person knows very well that this is the truth. Even today, studying his words has a great power to inspire us to come closer to God and follow his ways. We must just set ourselves to follow the Rebbe's words exactly as they are recorded in this and other works. Each one of his conversations has a formidable power to inspire people to come closer to God. They contain sound, direct pathways to God, pathways that are accessible to everyone, regardless of their level. Even people on the highest of levels can derive clear guidance and direction from his every word. At the other extreme, even a person on the lowest of levels, God forbid, can also receive direction and guidance on how to save his soul from destruction and return to God in truth. All that is necessary is to pay careful attention to the Rebbe's words and fulfill them honestly and with simplicity, with no attempts at sophistication. Happy are those who hold on to his words. Once he said, as if in amazement, as far as the world is concerned, they're all equal, the Zohar and the Tikkunim. Implicit in what he said was that in actual fact, there is a tremendous difference between the Zohar and the Tikkuni Zohar. Even though the Zohar is very holy and awesome, the holiness of the Tikkuni Zohar is far greater. The Rebbe said, whatever I tell you of my Torah ideas is only the scraps, and these scraps are thousands and myriads of levels lower than the level at which I perceive them. I am unable to say them any lower. This point has been noted elsewhere. I was told that previously he had said that he had certain Torah teachings without garments. This means that he was unable to clothe them in any garment. He quoted the Talmudic dictum, the biblical text is a mere support. That is, the biblical text cited in the Talmudic passage in question is a mere support, asmakta, not the source, for the enactment of the oral law under discussion. He went on to say, the Torah teaching rests on the biblical text just as a person may rest on something for support less than, and certainly that which is being supported is greater than the supporter greater than. Similarly, his perception of Torah was so exalted that it could not be clothed in any way except through an asmakta. Understand this. He said that the reason he had to struggle so much before he taught his lessons was because it was very difficult for him to bring his Torah ideas down and clothe them in garments and words in order to express them and reveal them. Prior to giving his lessons he would sit with us for as much as an hour or two, and from his movements and groaning it was clear that he was struggling. He would sit without speaking, but his movements betrayed the intensity of the struggle. Only afterwards would he open his mouth and begin speaking. Once I watched with my own eyes as he was beginning to teach us the lesson, 9 tikkunim, in Likuti Maharan I, 20. He kept on repeating the words, 9 tikkunim, again and again, and each time he would give a strong pull at his beard with both hands. He almost pulled out the hairs of his beard because of his infinite awe and devotion at that moment. He said that anything he did in public was extremely difficult for him, and when he gave a lesson, he felt as if his very soul would leave him as soon as the first word came from his mouth. He had the same feeling when he recited the Kiddush on Shabbat, that as soon as he would bring out the first word his very soul would depart. The Rebbe's lessons and discourses are universal. The more you explore them, the more you will discover their wonderful freshness and sweetness and radiant light. They possess great depth both in their simple meaning and on the hidden, mystical level. All his lessons contain awesome secrets, but this is something that is impossible to explain. Each lesson also deals with the mystical significance of the mitzvah. Each lesson relates to some of the mystical devotions as explained in Kabbalistic works like the Eitz Hayim and the Pre-Eitz Hayim. Thus the lesson, Who is the man who desires life?, relates to the Kabbalistic meaning of the mitzvah of lulav, even though there seems to be no explicit reference to the lulav in the lesson. Similarly, I believe that the lesson When the Wicked Drew Near Me relates to the Kabbalistic meaning of the Kiddush. The same is true of the Rebbe's other lessons. Thus a number of lessons in the book, such as Pharaoh's chariots, with trumpets, I am, happy as the people, and several other lessons that he gave in that period, are all bound up with the mystical significance of the tefillin. I once heard the Rebbe say that he wanted to write a commentary on the Eitz Hayim. There was no need for a simple commentary explaining the language. What was needed was to give Torah lessons which would constitute a commentary. He added, I have already given several lessons that are relevant to the Eitz Chaim. In addition, I was told that the Rebbe said he had recently completed the Eitz Chaim and saw that it was entirely musar, moral guidance, regarding the lessons written in his own words. He said they will bear the same minute examination as biblical verses. They contain many hidden meanings. There are passages where the Rebbe repeats himself apparently for no reason. However, these passages have to be examined minutely because each of the repetitions has a purpose. The Rebbe also said that the lessons that were written in his own words possess a special power because of their universality. See above number 348. The most important thing is the musar, the guidance and the prescriptions for practical living, that emerges from every one of his lessons. This is besides the hidden secrets they contain, which cannot be explained in writing, and must be left for the reader himself to form his own conception. I was told that in the period before I became close to him, he had said he was longing for a follower who would be both learned and gifted with an outstanding power of language. Then he would be able to explain the writings of the Ari so clearly that even young people who know how to pick up a book and understand it would be able to learn and understand all the writings of the Ari. Once I was talking to the Rebbe about the Kabbalistic teachings of the Ari. He said there is a complete unity between the teachings of the Ari and those of Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. Some years later I had another opportunity to discuss the Aris Kabbalah with him, and he said it was far more exalted than the Kabbalah of the author of the Pardes.is. I was shaken, and asked him with trepidation, "But did I not once hear from your very lips that in actual fact it is all a unity?" He said, "Most likely, if I said this, I knew what I was saying." This may seem somewhat mysterious, but anyone with an understanding heart will be able to get a faint conception of how the apparent contradiction can in fact be reconciled, and the Rebbe's words are alive and everlasting, true, firm, established, enduring, and righteous. For the ultimate and inner truth is that both sets of teachings are a total unity, yet in spite of this, the approach of the Ari to the revelation of mystical secrets is far more exalted than the methods of the parties. Even though in truth they are a unity, it is impossible to speak about this at length, because the glory of God is a hidden thing, and those who are wise will understand. The Rebbe said that students of his works who have a little intelligence believe that the Kabbalistic approach of the Ari and others is also alluded to in his books, and they consider it a point in their favor that his works reach such a high level. What such people do not realize is that the opposite is true. The Kabbalistic approach of the earlier authorities is also included in his writings. While the Rebbe did not finish the thought explicitly, his meaning was quite clear. His teachings go beyond those of the earlier masters, and the goal of his own teachings is far and away more exalted. Nevertheless, the ideas of the earlier masters are also included in his teachings. During the intermediate days of Sukkot 5569, 1808, the Rebbe asked, "Where are we holding in the prayers?" Later he explained himself, saying that his teachings followed the order of the prayer book, and each lesson had relevance to a different place in the prayers. So far we are still before Baruch She'amar, but after Hoda. He said it was fair to expect that there would be someone with such a power to pray that his prayers would be in accordance with all the lessons. However, he himself would have to live a long life in order to be able to finish the whole order of prayers. That is, to give teachings following the entire order of the prayers up to the very end. When I first drew close to him, he said to some others when I was not there, "I thank God for sending me a young man who will ensure that not a single word of mine will ever be lost again." His intention was that I should write every word that came from his lips, his discourses and teachings, and even his casual conversations, for they too are Torah. Thus not a single word would ever be lost again. Once he came into his house and asked for me, and he was very disappointed not to find me there at that moment. He said he had no one he could tell what he had to reveal. "I can hold an enormous amount to myself," he said, "and I never speak unless the water is already brimming over so much that it has to flow out, but right now I don't even have someone to talk to." He had already said to me when I first became his follower, "If you will be pure and sincere, you will be able to hear a great deal from me, for I need someone I can speak to. Many times I have to bring out certain things and say them. That is why I need someone I can speak to." On several occasions he revealed Torah to whoever happened to be with him at the time. Once he told me about one of these occasions, saying he had given over a lesson to a man who did not understand anything he was saying. Afterwards he said to me, "Seeing as I had to speak and reveal a teaching, and this man came along, I said it to him. but he really wanted his words to be heard by someone who could at least grasp something. He said to me, "Surely you are entitled to feel encouraged, seeing that you have such a great share in the book." Namely Likuti Maharan, which was being printed at the time. He went on to say that the whole book was mine, because without me, the book would never have come into the world. He explained to me how it was that the whole book had come about through me. Then he said, "You yourself know something of the true greatness of this book and its holiness. And even more than this, you should have faith in its greatness. They've printed 1,000 copies," he said, "and each one will come into the hands of several people. In other words, I should take heart from having been privileged to have such a positive influence over the community as a whole." Once when I was not there, he spoke to his other followers about the great share I had in the book. Really all of it, he told them they ought to feel indebted to me, because without my work not a single page of his books would remain. He said, "Each one of you has a share in my Torah, but Nozan has a bigger share than all of you. You know very well that if it had not been for him, you would not have had a single page of my book." He said to me, "Will you be depressed? You of all people should be especially happy always." And he said, "Are you going to let yourself be pushed down? A lot is going to happen. Hold firm, my brother." He also said to me, "God is with you. Don't be afraid." He said there was not a single limb of the human body about which he had not taught Torah. He had already given teachings about every limb of the human form. It is a Kabbalistic axiom that the human form possesses the highest mystical significance. He once spoke about the achievements of the Baal Shem Tov and some other Tzaddikim. He said they had undoubtedly succeeded in improving the world. However, after they left this world, the effects of their work did not endure. The illumination and arousal they evoked in their students did not extend to succeeding generations. What was needed, he said, was to achieve something that would last forever. On another occasion he spoke in a similar vein, saying it was necessary to leave pupils who would have pupils of their own, and they in turn would have their pupils, and so on. This way the movement would gain momentum and continue growing from generation to generation. Someone told me the Rebbe said he did not attach such importance to his own exalted perceptions. The main thing was when he managed to communicate something to others. All the worlds, from the highest to the lowest, depended on the words he spoke in public. One night we stood around him for a long time discussing many of the different teachings he had revealed. Today they have all been published, but at that time his books had still not been printed. I myself mentioned a number of different lessons he had given, praising their amazing freshness and originality. And indeed everything he taught was a complete innovation in its own right, stirring the very soul with its sweetness and freshness. The conversation went on for quite some time. The following morning I went with him on a journey he had to make. He said, "Yesterday we laid out our merchandise and put it in order. Thank God it is very good merchandise indeed. How excellent it would be if this shop had a first-class assistant who could arrange all the stock tidily, folding each piece and putting it in its right place with the edge facing outwards, just like professional shop assistants do. They fold the stock neatly, leaving just a little piece sticking out so the customers can immediately see what beautiful stock there is as soon as they enter the store. The moment someone comes in to buy something, the assistant can immediately put his hands on just what the customer needs and quickly spread it out in front of him. This way he can immediately show him the splendor and glory of this excellent merchandise. The Rebbe's meaning is self-evident. What was needed was a person who was thoroughly conversant with all of his teachings, and who could arrange each teaching properly, with the edge outwards, as it were. Then when someone came wanting to draw closer to the Rebbe and discuss his teachings, this person could immediately suggest which teaching was most appropriate for him. All the Rebbe's teachings are universal in scope, and every individual can find in them exactly what he needs. All that is required is someone who is thoroughly conversant with them, and who can suggest the most appropriate teaching at any given time. The other details of the Rebbe's analogy you can understand for yourself. The Rebbe once told me he had exalted purposes of his own in the way he used to converse with other people. However, it is impossible for me to reveal these matters, he said, because I still have to talk to you. And if he were to reveal them, he would no longer be able to achieve what he wanted in his conversations. He also said to the Rav of Breslov, Reb Aharon, "I love you very much indeed, and my blessing to you is that in the next world you should be worthy of understanding my everyday conversations." The Rebbe said this before he had been in the Holy Land. The Rebbe had told his brother Reb Yeshiel that he should make a point of talking to people in order to bring them closer to God. Reb Yeshiel raised a question about this, saying there were many occasions when one was forced to engage in idle conversation as a result or to discuss secular affairs. The Rebbe replied that the very fact that one brought some Torah into these conversations was the way to elevate them. Similarly, the sages said they wanted to suppress the book of Ecclesiastes. What was their reason for not doing so? Because it begins with words of Torah and ends with words of Torah. The point has already been made that a person who is fully conversant with the Rebbe's works can find all the conversations in the world within his teachings. There is not a single conversation in the world that does not have some relevance to his teachings. The Rebbe himself wrote down many of his own lessons. A few were written by the inner circle of his followers, and the remainder by me. The Rebbe said that what I wrote came very near to expressing what he intended, and my use of language was acceptable to him. He said I was second only to himself in terms of the clarity with which the teachings were expressed, and that my style was far superior to that of the others. However, his own was of course far superior. Below his, however, my style was closest as compared with that of the other members of the circle, which he had found highly unacceptable in several respects. For the most part they completely failed to comprehend his intended meaning, and even the little they had understood they were unable to express in writing in the way they had understood it in their hearts. My Lord God has given me the language for teaching, and with thanks to God my language found favor in his eyes. When the Rebbe traveled to Novorich, Reb Naphtali went with him. In the coach Reb Naphtali happened to have the manuscript of Sefer Hamidot, the Aleph Bet book, with him. The Rebbe noticed it and said, "My dearly beloved friend, my beloved faithful friend, this is what made me a Jew." In other words, it was the teachings in the Aleph Bet book about all the different character traits that had enabled the Rebbe to break all his traits and desires, and achieve what he did. The Rebbe said that the Aleph Bet book had included a chapter on healing containing all remedies. There was not a single illness in the world the remedy of which was not included, he said. However, he had not wanted to publish this chapter, and he burned it. The Rebbe said that if the Baal Shem Tov had heard his teachings he would also have found them original, and if Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had heard his teachings he would also have found them original, even for his time. When I wanted to go to the land of Israel I gave my teachings a new direction. When I started my journey they changed again to a higher level. When I was actually there I gave my teachings a new direction, and when I returned I gave them a new direction still. His awesome perceptions of Torah really began after his visit to the Holy Land, and indeed he reached level where he was actually ashamed of his teachings prior to his pilgrimage. Almost all of Likutei Moharan consists of teachings dating from after his return from the Holy Land, with the exception of about 3 or 4 pages in the middle of the book. Once when the Rebbe was speaking about Likutei Moharan, he said with a smile that his books would be printed, and in each one they would write after his name, author of book such and such and such and such, just as they do in books by authors with many works to their name. He wanted to imply that many books by him would remain, and this has been fulfilled with God's help. Less than I would have thought that you would bring me a horse in reward for the Torah lessons I've taught. On Shabbat night he spoke of his desire to have a fine horse and a good saddle. True, it is written, the horse is delusory for salvation, yet the horse is prepared for the day of battle, but salvation comes from God, greater than that a single word does not leave my lips without some innovation. That goes without saying. Not even a breath leaves my lips without originality. I once said to him that even his ordinary conversations were quite literally Torah. He said this was correct, and that just as it was impossible for a Torah scholar to talk without at least a few words of Torah entering in, expressions from the Talmud and the like, so too in his case, no matter what he said, the Torah was bound come in. Indeed, we saw with our own eyes many times how his ordinary conversations turned into Torah teachings. A quite casual conversation would develop into the most extraordinary Torah teaching. I am speaking only about what was visible to us, quite apart from the many hidden things contained in his conversations, of which people on our level had no conception. The Rebbe told us he was in the habit of making all kinds of pleas and entreaties to God as he sat alone at the table in his private room for the third meal of Shabbat. He would speak and speak to God until he reached a point where he was speaking Torah spontaneously, without even intending it. He would listen to the words of Torah coming from his lips, and see how beautiful they were, and well worth telling others. These are the lessons I have sometimes given after the departure of Shabbat, after Havdalah. In other words, those teachings were based on the Torah he had spoken spontaneously at the third meal. The lesson "When the Wicked Drew Near Me" contains the Kabbalistic intentions of the Kiddush. The Rebbe said that even those who hear the Tzadik's teachings without understanding them will understand them in the next world. Rabbi Nachman's Wisdom number 26. In essence, his teachings are directed at our souls, and when we reach the next world our souls will be well versed in these exalted teachings. In this world the main thing is to fulfill the Tzadik's teachings to the letter, according to their simple meaning. We should follow them in the way the Rebbe advised us to several times, namely to go with a particular lesson for a period of time, until all our devotions from morning till night are in accordance with the lesson in question, Ibid. After this we should continue with another teaching drawn from a different lesson. We should follow this practice constantly, until we have gone through all the Rebbe's lessons. God will help with this. It is very important not to be in too much of a hurry or try to do everything all at once. Proceed calmly in an orderly way, advancing steadily a little at a time. This is the way to make genuine progress, until in the end we will be able to fulfill all the Rebbe's teachings. The links with which the Rebbe's lessons are structured are literally like those used in building or weaving. He starts off by linking two things together. Next he ties a third thing to the second using a number of strong links. The third thing he binds to a fourth, and so on. Then usually he goes back to bind all four things together. At first they were not all linked with each other. The first was linked to the second to the third, and the third to the fourth, but as yet there was no link between the fourth and the first. However, his next stage is to bring a biblical verse, rabbinic dictum, or some other proof, so as to bind all four things together until the link is completely firm. He then goes back and starts binding a number of other things together, and all of them together. He then binds to the first structure. At first, these two holy structures are linked only insofar as one of the things in the second structure is attached to one of the things in the first. But afterwards he goes back and shows how everything in each structure is bound with everything in the other. He puts out extension girders by which the third item in the first structure is bound to the fourth in the second structure, and then to the second item in a third structure. Next he works on the links between the second and third structures, and so on until everything is bound together in a remarkable unity. The Rebbe himself discussed this whole subject in my presence the day after Yom Kippur 5571, 1810, 7 days before his death. It would be valuable to extend this analysis by bringing examples from various lessons in order to enable the reader to understand a little of the methods of Likutei Moharan. The Rebbe once explained to me that all his lessons are like entering a palace, containing halls and chambers, anterooms and entrances, all of the most awesome beauty, with story upon story, each with its own unique style. No sooner do you enter a room and start examining it, wondering at the extraordinary novelty of the design, than you notice an amazing opening leading to another room. And so it goes on from one room to the next, then on to another story, each opening onto the next with entrances and windows, everything linked and bound to everything else, with the profoundest wisdom and ultimate beauty. It is impossible to explain this in writing to anyone who has not yet begun to understand something of the depth of the Rebbe's words. Happy is the person who is worthy of tasting the pleasant sweetness of his deep and holy teachings. Likutei Moharan 2, 412 contains a discussion on the healing of a wound that seems to have no explanation or connection with the rest of the lesson. When the people from Latizin came to the Rebbe for Shavuot, they told him about the situation. On Shavuot itself, the Rebbe gave the lesson cited above, in which he spoke in detail about healing. When the people from Latizin returned home, they were told that at the very moment the Rebbe was giving the lesson, the infected area had opened, and the man's pain eased immediately. After a few days the area was completely healed. Countless times we saw before our eyes how things that were happening in the world, and especially to the Rebbe's followers, were all included in his lessons. By means of his Torah teachings he drew sweet, positive, and salutary influences into all aspects of the world, both in general and in particular, spiritually and physically. Less than each of the Rebbe's lessons included any number of events that were taking place at the time. For example, the lesson, "It happened as they emptied their sacks," is timely to all that was going on then. Aside from the hidden aspects of which only God is aware, the teaching also addresses all those present at the time it was given. The concerns, thoughts, and affairs, as well as the circumstances and troubles affecting each and every one of the people standing there, are to be explicitly found within the words of the lesson. Indeed, the events of the world at large, and the wars that were being waged, even whatever was happening throughout all the upper worlds, are all hinted at in his words, their universality being very great from every conceivable point of view. Their remarkableness can neither be expressed in words nor fathomed in the heart. In some cases we were able to see how current incidents were woven into each of his lessons and teachings in a wonderfully unique and awesome manner. Nothing like it has ever been seen or heard greater than. The Rebbe once told a story to explain why he revealed so many remarkable teachings and stories and shared so many of his thoughts with us, even though it did not yet seem possible that his words could achieve their purpose. Once there was a king whose only son became so ill that all the doctors despaired of curing him. Meanwhile a doctor of outstanding wisdom came. The king begged him to try his best to cure the prince. The doctor told him truthfully that the chances of the prince being healed were very remote. However, there was still a means of last resort. If they tried this, there was a very faint possibility that the prince might be cured. "But I do not know whether I should tell you what this method is," said the doctor, "because it will be very hard indeed to use it." The king pressed him to reveal what the method was. The doctor said, "You should know that your son's illness is so critical that it is now quite impossible to give him even a single drop of medicine to swallow. However, there exist certain remedies that are so priceless that a single small bottle costs thousands and thousands of gold pieces. What you have to do is to fill barrels full of these precious remedies and take bucketfuls of these remedies and pour them over your son. Obviously all these precious remedies will go to waste, but the prince will become very slightly stronger as a result. And it may be that as they pour all this over him, a tiny drop will go into his mouth, and then it may thus be possible for him to be healed." The king immediately agreed and gave instructions to do what the doctor had said. And this was how the prince was healed. The meaning is obvious. It is precisely because we are so crushed by our sickness, the sickness of the soul, God forbid, that the tzaddik, the faithful doctor, is forced to pour such priceless remedies over us, even though it would seem that virtually all of them will go to waste. Nevertheless, the sweet scent is absorbed, and in the fullness of time it may be that we will be able to let a drop penetrate our mouths and our inner being. Then there will be some hope for us to be healed, spiritually and physically.